A millionaire finds abandoned twins inside a trash bin, but they weren't left there by accident. When one of the boys says, "We were told a rich man would come," his world flips upside down. A hidden photo, a haunting past, and a DNA test reveal a shocking bloodline connection he never expected. But 25 years later, a single phone call uncovers the real reason why they were left for him. What secret was buried with those boys, and who wanted him to find it? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Mateo Greaves drummed his fingers against the leather steering wheel of his Bentley, jaw clenched tight. The board meeting had been a disaster. 3 hours of arguing over profit margins and market strategies had left him with a pounding headache and a sour mood that matched the gray winter sky. "Incompetent fools," he muttered, checking his Rolex, already late for his next appointment. Snow fell in fat, lazy flakes, coating the city in white. Traffic stretched ahead like a frozen river. Mateo's patience snapped. He jerked the wheel, turning down a narrow alley that would bypass the gridlock. His car crawled between brick buildings, splashing through dirty slush, and that's when he heard it. A faint cry, barely audible above the purr of his engine. Mateo frowned, slowing the car. Probably just a stray cat. He should keep driving. Time was money, and he had wasted enough today. The cry came again, higher this time, more human. Something twisted in Mateo's chest. Against his better judgment, he stopped the car and stepped out into the biting cold. The sound seemed to be coming from a large dumpster pushed against the brick wall. "Hello?" he called, feeling ridiculous. The crying paused, then started again, softer as if trying to hide. Mateo approached the dumpster, nose wrinkling at the smell. He lifted the heavy plastic lid. His heart stopped. 2 tiny faces stared up at him, identical in their fear. Twin boys, no older than 7, huddled together beneath a thin, dirty blanket. Their cheeks were red from cold and tears, dark hair dusted with snowflakes that had fallen through the partially open lid. "Dear God," Mateo whispered. One boy clutched something in his small fist, a crumpled piece of paper. When Mateo reached down, the child flinched, but surrendered it without a word. The handwritten note made Mateo's throat tighten. "Please give them the life I can't." "It's okay," he said, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "I'm going to help you." The twins looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. One nodded slightly, the braver one, Mateo guessed. "I'm cold," the boy whispered. Something protective and fierce surged through Mateo. He shrugged off his expensive wool coat and reached into the dumpster, lifting first one boy, then the other. They were frighteningly light, like birds with hollow bones. "My name is Mateo," he said, wrapping his coat around their thin shoulders. "What are your names?" "I'm Max," said the slightly bolder one. "He's Milo." Milo hadn't spoken yet, just stared at Mateo with wide, wary eyes. Mateo pulled out his phone and dialed 911, explaining the situation in clipped tones. While they waited, he turned the car's heat to full blast and let the boys sit in the back seat, watching as they marveled at the leather interior and touched the buttons with cautious fingers. When the police and ambulance arrived, their lights painted the alley in red and blue. An officer took Mateo's statement while EMTs checked the twins, wrapping them in silver thermal blankets. "You did the right thing, sir," the officer said, closing his notebook. Mateo nodded, watching as the boys were guided toward the ambulance. Max looked back once, raising a small hand in goodbye. Milo just clutched his brother's sleeve, head down. Something in Mateo's chest ached as they disappeared from view. That night, Mateo paced his penthouse, a glass of scotch untouched on the marble counter. Sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those identical faces staring up at him from the dumpster, their thin shoulders. The note crumpled in tiny fingers. "Please give them the life I can't." The words haunted him until morning light filtered through his floor-to-ceiling windows. By noon, Mateo found himself parking outside the Department of Child Services, a bland concrete building he'd driven past 100 times without noticing. He didn't know why he was there. This wasn't his problem. He'd done his part, called the authorities given his statement. Yet here he was, Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The waiting room smelled of old coffee and cleaning supplies. Mateo approached the front desk, feeling strangely out of place in his tailored suit. "I'm inquiring about twin boys found yesterday," he said. "I'm the one who discovered them." The receptionist eyed him curiously before making a call. Minutes later, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes introduced herself as Ms. Lorne. "Mr. Greaves, I'm handling the boys' case. Would you like to speak in my office?" In her cramped space, surrounded by overflowing filing cabinets, Ms. Lorne explained the situation. "We've found no missing persons reports matching their description. Max and Milo, that's all we know about them. No last name, no birth certificates we can locate." "Where are they now?" Mateo asked, surprised by how much he cared about the answer. "Still at the hospital for observation. They're malnourished but otherwise healthy. Tomorrow they'll be transferred to a group home until we can place them in foster care." She sighed. "Unfortunately, keeping siblings together, especially twins, makes placement harder. The system is overcrowded as it is." Something cold settled in Mateo's stomach. His phone buzzed. David, his assistant, reminding him about a meeting in 30 minutes. "Thank you for your time," Mateo said, standing to leave. He was halfway to his car when his phone rang again. "Where are you?" David's voice was tense. "The investors are waiting." "I need to make a stop first," Mateo replied. "Whatever it is, it can wait. These people flew in from Tokyo specifically to—" "Handle it, David. Reschedule if necessary." "Is this about those kids? The ones from yesterday?" "Mateo, listen to me. Stay out of it. You did your good deed. Don't complicate your life." Mateo hung up and turned back toward the building, something inside him shifting, breaking free. An hour later, after signing more papers than a corporate merger, Mateo Greaves became an emergency foster parent to twin 7-year-old boys. The morning after bringing the twins home, Mateo sat at his dining table, laptop open, attempting to review quarterly projections. The mansion had never felt so chaotic. Every few minutes, a crash, giggle, or shout interrupted his concentration. "Mr. Greaves," Elena called from somewhere upstairs. "The boys are jumping on the bed again." Mateo rubbed his temples. "I have a conference call in 15 minutes, he muttered to himself. Just then, Max slid into the dining room in his socks, nearly toppling a vase. "Mr. Grumpy, can we have ice cream?" "It's 9 in the morning, Mateo replied, trying to keep his voice even. "And my name is Mateo, not Mr. Grumpy." Max tilted his head. "But you're always frowning, like this." He scrunched his face into an exaggerated scowl that, despite himself, almost made Mateo smile. Before he could respond, Milo appeared, quieter than his brother, but equally disruptive in his own way. He climbed onto the chair beside Mateo and peered at the laptop screen. "What are those squiggly lines?" Milo asked, pointing at the stock charts. "They're very important squiggly lines that help me make money," Mateo answered, gently moving the boy's finger away from the screen. "Are you super rich?" Max asked, climbing onto the table itself. "Do you have a swimming pool? Can we get a dog?" "Off the table, please," Mateo said firmly, "and no, we cannot get a dog." "But rich people always have dogs," Max insisted. Mateo's phone rang, his conference call. He answered it, trying to sound composed, while Max made faces at him and Milo began coloring on what appeared to be important contracts. That evening, after a day of missed calls, interrupted meetings, and what felt like 100 questions about everything from helicopters to why the sky is blue, Mateo stood in the doorway of the twins' bedroom. Elena was helping them into pajamas that still had price tags, hastily purchased by his assistant that afternoon. "Time for bed, niños," Elena said gently. "Will you tuck us in, Mr. Grumpy?" Max asked, looking directly at Mateo. Something in the boy's expectant face made it impossible to refuse. Awkwardly, Mateo approached the beds and pulled the covers up to their chins. "You're the one from the picture," Max said suddenly, his voice different, almost rehearsed. Mateo froze. "What picture?" Milo nodded solemnly. "We were told a rich man would come." Elena glanced at Mateo with concern as he knelt between the two beds. "What do you mean? Who told you that?" Max reached under his pillow and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Mateo carefully opened it to find a newspaper clipping, a photo of himself at a charity gala from last year. "It was in our blanket," Milo whispered. "The lady said to wait for you." Mateo's hands trembled as he stared at the newspaper clipping. The twins watched him with wide, innocent eyes that somehow seemed to hold secrets beyond their years. "Elena, could you stay with them for a moment?" Mateo asked, his voice tight. He stepped into the hallway, pulling his phone from his pocket. Martin Reyes answered on the second ring. "It's a bit late, Greaves." "I need you. Now." Mateo's voice was low, controlled, but urgent. "Someone's been planning this. The twins had a photo of me from last year's Children's Hospital fundraiser." A pause. "That's unsettling. Find out everything. Who took that photo? How it ended up with these boys. I want to know who's behind this." Mateo glanced back toward the bedroom where Elena was softly singing to the twins. "Someone targeted me specifically, Martin. I'll start digging tonight. First thing tomorrow, I'll need access to the original note, the blanket, anything they had with them." After hanging up, Mateo returned to find both boys already asleep, their small chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Something about their vulnerability pierced through his usual defenses. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the mansion's tall windows as Max and Milo explored their temporary home with unbridled curiosity. Mateo watched from his security room, flipping between cameras as the twins discovered the grand piano in the music room, pressed their faces against the aquarium in the study, and ran their fingers along the spines of books they couldn't yet read. "Look, Max," Milo pointed to a crystal chandelier. "It's like diamonds from the sky." On another screen, Elena appeared, guiding them toward the kitchen. "Come, niños. I made pancakes." The boys' faces lit up as if they'd been offered treasure. Such a simple thing, pancakes. Yet their reaction suggested it might be rare or even new to them. Mateo switched to security footage from yesterday, scanning backward through the arrival of the social worker, the police officers, searching for any clue about who might have orchestrated this situation. "Sir?" Elena appeared at the door, making him jump. "The boys are asking for you." "I'm busy," Mateo said automatically. Elena's expression softened. "They've made something for you. A drawing." Mateo hesitated, torn between his investigation and the unexpected pull he felt toward the twins. "Tell them I'll be there in a minute." When Elena left, Mateo dialed Martin again. "Anything yet?" "It's barely morning, Greaves, but I've confirmed the photo was taken by a freelance photographer at the gala. Published in the Tribune business section." "So anyone could have cut it out," Mateo muttered. "Exactly. I'm working on tracking down who had access to the twins before they were left for you to find." Mateo ended the call and headed toward the kitchen, where childish laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for too long. As he approached, he saw Elena helping Milo pour orange juice, while Max attempted to cut his pancakes into the shape of a star. For a moment, watching from the doorway, Mateo's paranoia gave way to something else. Curiosity about these boys who had so unexpectedly entered his life, carrying his picture and changing his carefully ordered world. Earlier, Ms. Lorne sat at her cluttered desk, surrounded by stacks of case files. Her fingers moved swiftly across her keyboard as she searched various databases for any trace of the twins' relatives. The boys' case troubled her, abandoned in a trash bin with nothing but a blanket and a cryptic note. No birth certificates, no medical records, nothing to indicate where they came from. She picked up her phone and dialed Mateo Greaves. "Mr. Greaves, it's Ms. Lorne from Social Services. I wanted to update you on our search for the boys' family." "And?" Mateo's voice was clipped, impatient. "Nothing yet. It's as if they appeared out of nowhere." She hesitated. "The boys seem comfortable with you. Have they mentioned anything about their past?" "No," Mateo said, glancing across his office to where the twins were coloring with Elena. "Just that cryptic comment about a picture and being told a rich man would come." After hanging up, Mateo's mind drifted to a memory he'd spent years trying to bury. He was 18 again, standing in the doorway of a small, dingy apartment. A skinny 10-year-old boy with wide eyes looked up at him. "You're really leaving?" young Jake had asked, his voice small. "I got that scholarship, Jake. This is my chance." Mateo had knelt down, placing his hands on his little brother's shoulders. "I'll come back for you when I can." Jake's eyes had filled with tears. "Dad's gonna be mad when he finds out. Just stay out of his way. I'll call you every week." But he hadn't. The calls became less frequent as Mateo built his new life. The guilt came in waves, while buying his first expensive suit, his first luxury car, his penthouse. Each success felt tainted by the knowledge that Jake remained behind with their father's rage and heavy fists. Mateo blinked the memory away, focusing instead on the financial report open on his laptop. But the numbers blurred before his eyes. That evening, after dinner, Mateo stepped into his living room to find it transformed. The twins had gathered every pillow and blanket they could find, creating an elaborate fort between the sofa and coffee table. Elena stood nearby, smiling as she folded laundry. "Mr. Mateo," Max called out, "we built a castle." "It's not a castle, it's a spaceship," Milo corrected, poking his head out from under a blanket. "It's both," Max insisted. "A space castle." Mateo opened his mouth to scold them for the mess, but stopped. Something about their innocent joy reminded him of Jake, how they'd built similar forts as children, hiding from their father's anger. "Very impressive engineering," he said instead, surprising himself. The twins beamed at him. "Want to come in?" Milo asked shyly. "I have work to do," Mateo replied automatically, but he didn't walk away immediately. He watched as they crawled back inside, whispering and giggling. Elena approached him quietly. "They're good boys," she said. "Very polite. Someone taught them manners." Mateo nodded, thinking again of his brother. He wondered where Jake was now, if he'd managed to escape their father too, or if he'd become like him. "They can keep the fort up until bedtime," Mateo said, his voice softer than usual. He turned away before Elena could see the emotion in his eyes. Days turned into weeks, and despite Mateo's initial resistance, the twins carved out a place in his carefully structured life. It started with small things, the way they began calling him Sir Mateo, after watching a Knights and Dragons movie one rainy afternoon. "Sir Mateo, we require assistance with this puzzle, please," Max would call from the floor of the living room, where puzzle pieces lay scattered. "Sir Mateo, is it time for our royal feast?" Milo would ask at dinner time, his shy smile growing more confident each day. Mateo found himself responding to their playful title, sometimes even playing along. "Knights of the Round Table, your dinner awaits," he announced one evening, surprising even himself with the warmth in his voice. One Saturday morning, Mateo woke to unusual silence. He padded down the hallway in his slippers, suspicious of the quiet. As he turned the corner into his home office, twin battle cries erupted as Max and Milo ambushed him with Nerf guns. "Surrender, dragon!" Max shouted, foam darts bouncing off Mateo's chest. For a moment, Mateo stood frozen, his face unreadable. The boys' smiles began to fade, worry creeping into their eyes. Then, to everyone's surprise, especially his own, Mateo grabbed a fallen Nerf gun and fired back. "Dragons don't surrender that easily," he growled playfully. The twins shrieked with delight, scampering behind furniture as the three engaged in an epic battle that left them all breathless with laughter. Sunday mornings became pancake time, with Mateo rolling up his sleeves and letting the boys add chocolate chips and banana slices to the batter. The kitchen ended up a disaster zone, but the sound of their giggles made the mess worthwhile. "You're getting better at flipping them, Sir Mateo," Milo observed seriously one morning, maple syrup dripping down his chin. "Yeah, last week they all stuck to the ceiling," Max added with a snort. Mateo found himself smiling more, checking his phone less. Bedtime, once a simple good night at the door, evolved into reading stories. The twins snuggled on either side of him as he did different voices for each character. One evening, after the boys were asleep, Elena found Mateo sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at an old photograph. "They're changing you," she said softly, setting a cup of tea before him. Mateo sighed. They remind me of Jake and me before everything went wrong. His voice cracked slightly. I see my brother in their eyes sometimes. Elena sat across from him, her gaze gentle but direct. Perhaps this is your second chance, Mr. Mateo. Don't miss it while looking backward. The maple syrup was still sticky on Mateo's fingers as he wiped them with a damp cloth. The kitchen looked like a war zone. Flour dusted across the countertops, eggshells scattered, and batter splattered on the stovetop. But the mess didn't bother him like it once would have. The twins sat at the breakfast bar, their faces smeared with syrup and chocolate chips, giggling as they recounted their pancake-flipping adventures. And then Sir Mateo's pancake did a somersault in the air, Max demonstrated with his hands, nearly knocking over his milk. But it landed perfectly, Milo added, his eyes wide with admiration. Like magic. Mateo felt something warm spread through his chest. These moments had become precious to him, though he'd never admit it aloud. Just as he was about to suggest they clean up, his phone buzzed. Martin Reyes's name flashed on the screen. I need to take this, Mateo said, stepping into the hallway. Elena will help you clean up. Mr. Greaves, Martin's gruff voice came through. I found something about that photo. Mateo's heart quickened. What is it? The image file. It was scanned from a physical photograph, and according to the metadata, it was only printed once, about 8 years ago. Where was it printed from? Mateo asked, his voice dropping to a whisper as he moved further from the kitchen. That's the interesting part. The original file was stored on a computer registered to Elaine Greaves. Mateo's breath caught. My mother's computer? Yes, the one kept at her old house in Oak Ridge, the house that's been sitting empty since she passed. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I'll call you back, Mateo said, ending the call. 2 hours later, after arranging for Elena to watch the boys, Mateo stood on the cracked walkway leading to his childhood home. The white paint had yellowed, the garden overgrown. He hadn't been back in years, not since the funeral. His key still worked in the lock. The door creaked open, revealing dust-covered furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts. The air was stale, thick with memories he'd tried to forget. In the living room, he paused before a wall of family photos. There was his mother, her gentle smile. And there, his heart clenched, was Jake, gap-toothed and beaming at age 10. The photo that had been with the twins was cropped from this larger family portrait. Mateo moved to his mother's study where her old desk sat untouched. He pulled open the drawer where she'd kept important documents. Inside, beneath faded papers, he found it. A torn corner of the same family portrait. Someone had been here, had taken the photo, had specifically targeted him by leaving the twins with his image. His fingers trembled as he touched the torn edge. Who would do this? Who even knew about this place anymore? Jake, he whispered, the name painful in his throat. Could it be you? The sky had turned a deep purple by the time Mateo's car pulled into the circular driveway of his mansion. His mind raced with questions that had no answers, possibilities that seemed both impossible and inevitable. The torn photograph burned in his pocket like a hot coal. As he stepped through the front door, the weight of the day's discoveries momentarily lifted at the sound of gleeful battle cries echoing from the living room. Halt, dragon! Max's voice commanded. Sir Milo, protect the castle. Mateo rounded the corner to find his pristine living room transformed into a medieval battlefield. Couch cushions formed a makeshift fortress, while the coffee table had been draped with a blanket to create a cave. The twins wore matching armor crafted from cardboard boxes crudely colored with markers. Pot lids served as shields, and paper towel rolls had become swords. Elena stood nearby, her hands covered in paint, clearly the accomplice to this nightly transformation. Sir Mateo has returned, Milo shouted when he spotted him, his shy voice unusually bold in character. Max charged forward, cardboard chest plate flapping. Quick, the dragon almost got through our defenses. We need your help. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, Mateo forgot about torn photographs and DNA tests and abandoned houses. He dropped his briefcase, loosened his tie, and growled like the fearsome dragon they needed him to be. Who dares challenge me? He roared, spreading his arms wide. The twins squealed with delight, attacking him with their cardboard weapons. Mateo pretended to be wounded, dropping dramatically to one knee. "You've wounded me, brave knights," he declared, clutching his side. Elena watched from the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. These moments had become more frequent, moments when Mateo forgot to be Mateo Greaves, CEO, and simply became the man these boys needed. After dinner and baths, with the twins tucked safely in bed, Mateo retreated to his study. The family portrait lay on his desk, the torn edge a jagged reminder of the mystery still unsolved. He poured himself a scotch, the amber liquid catching the light as he swirled it in the crystal tumbler. His phone rang, Martin Reyes's name illuminating the screen. "Tell me you have something," Mateo answered, his voice low. "I do," Martin replied. "The DNA results came back from those samples I took." Mateo's grip tightened on the glass. He'd authorized the discreet testing, needing to know if there was any biological connection between himself and the boys who had so unexpectedly entered his life. "You're not the father, Mr. Greaves." Mateo exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. "I didn't think I was." "But there's more," Martin continued. "There's a partial match in the system." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What kind of match?" "Familial. Someone with the last name Greaves. The boys are related to you, Mr. Greaves. They're not your children, but they're definitely your blood." The scotch glass slipped from Mateo's fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The twins' faces flashed in his mind, those familiar eyes, the shape of their smiles. How had he not seen it before? "Jake," he whispered, the name of his abandoned brother catching in his throat. "It has to be Jake." Mateo sat in his study, surrounded by the shards of his broken glass, but he barely noticed the mess. His mind had traveled back 15 years, to a rundown apartment across town where he'd last seen his brother. Jake had been 17 then, thin and jittery, his eyes constantly darting around the room. The same eyes the twins had. How had Mateo missed it? The resemblance was unmistakable now that he knew to look for it. "You can't just leave me here with him," Jake had pleaded, his voice breaking. Their father had passed out in the bedroom, another empty bottle beside him. "Take me with you, Mateo, please." But Mateo had been 22, finally free with a scholarship and an internship that promised escape. "I can't take care of you, Jake. I can barely take care of myself." "I'll change," Jake had promised, desperation making his voice crack. "No more drugs, no more trouble. I swear." Mateo had shaken his head, hefting his duffel bag over his shoulder. "You've said that before." "This time I mean it." Jake had grabbed his arm, eyes wild with fear. "He'll kill me, Mateo. You know he will." But Mateo had pulled away. "You're smart, Jake, smarter than me. Figure it out." The slam of that door had echoed in Mateo's nightmares for years, until he'd buried it so deep he could almost pretend it never happened. Mateo blinked back to the present, wiping moisture from his eyes. He reached for his phone again. "Martin, I need you to search correctional databases, aliases, everything. Look for Jake Greaves. He'd be 32 now." "Your brother?" Martin asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Yes," Mateo said, his throat tight. I think he might be the twins' father." After hanging up, Mateo walked through the quiet house, his footsteps heavy. As he passed the twins' room, he heard whispers and giggles. He paused, then gently pushed the door open. "Shouldn't you two be asleep?" he asked, trying to sound stern but failing. "We found something cool in the attic," Max exclaimed, bouncing on his bed. "Elena was showing us old stuff." Milo, quieter as always, pointed to the corner where a dusty guitar case leaned against the wall. "Can you play it?" Mateo froze. His mother's guitar. He hadn't seen it in years, had forgotten it was even stored here. "Please?" Max begged, eyes wide. "Just one song?" Something in their eager faces broke through Mateo's hesitation. He crossed the room and opened the case, running his fingers over the worn strings. He'd taught himself to play as a teenager, finding escape in music when home became unbearable. "Just one," he agreed, settling on the edge of Milo's bed. His fingers remembered what his mind had tried to forget, and soon a soft melody filled the room. The twins watched, transfixed, as Mateo lost himself in the song, his face transforming. For the first time since they'd known him, a genuine smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes and softening the hard lines of his features. "You look happy," Milo whispered when the song ended. Mateo looked up, surprised to find both boys staring at him with wonder. "I guess I am," he admitted, and was even more surprised to realize it was true. The next morning, Mateo sat across from Ms. Lorne in the social services office, his leather portfolio open on his lap. He'd spent half the night preparing documents, making calls to his lawyers, and outlining a case for permanent guardianship. For once, his business acumen felt like a blessing rather than a burden. "I've drafted a preliminary petition," he said, sliding the papers across her desk. "My legal team can expedite everything. I'm prepared to make this permanent." Ms. Lorne adjusted her glasses, scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. Her expression remained neutral, but Mateo detected a slight tightening around her mouth. "Mr. Greaves," she began carefully, "while I appreciate your enthusiasm, there's been a development." Mateo's stomach clenched. What kind of development? "A woman contacted us yesterday claiming to be the boy's maternal aunt." Ms. Lorne folded her hands on the desk. "She's provided some preliminary documentation that suggests she may indeed be related to Max and Milo." The room seemed to tilt. Mateo gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white. "That's impossible," he said, his voice unnaturally calm despite the panic rising in his chest. "My investigator has been thorough. There's been no mention of an aunt." "Family connections can be complicated, Mr. Greaves. People lose touch, move away." Ms. Lorne's tone was gentle but firm. "We're verifying her claims, of course, but if she is their aunt, she would have priority in placement considerations." Priority? The word felt like acid on his tongue. Over someone who's actually been caring for them? "Family reunification is always our first goal in the foster system." She hesitated. "I understand you've grown attached." "This isn't about attachment," Mateo interrupted, though they both knew it was a lie. "It's about stability. Uprooting them again would be traumatic." "Which is why we proceed carefully," Ms. Lorne assured him. "Nothing happens overnight." Mateo leaned forward, his mind racing through solutions like he would a business crisis. "What if I make a substantial donation to the department? New computers, renovations, whatever you need." Ms. Lorne's expression hardened. "Mr. Greaves, I appreciate that you're used to solving problems with money, but family court doesn't work that way. Attempting to influence placement decisions would be highly inappropriate." Mateo felt his face flush with embarrassment. "I didn't mean—" "I know exactly what you meant," she said, not unkindly. "But these boys aren't a business acquisition. The courts will consider what's best for them, not who has the deepest pockets." His phone buzzed. Martin Reyes was calling. Mateo excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "Tell me you have something," he said without preamble. "I found Jake," Martin said, his voice grim. "County records show he died of an overdose 3 years ago." Mateo leaned against the wall, the news hitting him like a physical blow. 3 years? Then he couldn't be. "No, he's definitely the father. Birth certificates confirm it. But here's where it gets complicated. Jake was married briefly. Her name was Eliza Winters. She disappeared shortly after the twins were born. And the aunt? Could be Eliza's sister. I'm still digging." Mateo ended the call and returned to Ms. Lorne's office, his mind reeling. His brother was dead. The twins were his nephews. And now some stranger, this alleged aunt, threatened to take them away. "I need more time," he said, his voice hoarse. "These boys are my family." Ms. Lorne raised an eyebrow. "Your family?" Mateo met her gaze steadily. "Yes, and I'm prepared to prove it." After a few days, Mateo arrived at the county courthouse, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The marble floors echoed with his footsteps as he made his way to the family court division for his background briefing. The formal proceeding was just a routine step in the fostering process, but to Mateo, it felt like his entire world hung in the balance. He'd barely slept last night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Max and Milo's faces, their hopeful smiles when he'd promised they could stay. the way they'd built a fortress of pillows in his living room, the sound of their laughter filling spaces in his home that had been silent for too long. As he approached the clerk's desk, his phone vibrated. A message from Martin Reyes. Mateo stepped aside into an alcove and opened it. Found him. Jake Greaves is alive, currently serving 5-year sentence under alias Michael Torres in Nevada State Prison. Records confirm he had 2 dependents registered under social assistance 3 years ago. Max and Milo Greaves, sending full file now. Mateo's hands began to shake so badly he nearly dropped the phone. The world around him blurred as he stared at the screen, trying to process what he was reading. Jake was alive, his brother was alive. A photo appeared in the message thread, a mugshot of a gaunt man with hollow cheeks and familiar eyes. Mateo would have walked past him on the street without recognition, but there was no mistaking those eyes. They were the same ones that had looked up at him with tears the day Mateo had walked away 20 years ago. "Mr. Greaves," Ms. Lorne approached, clipboard in hand. "The clerk is ready for your paperwork." Mateo nodded mechanically but couldn't move. His phone vibrated again. "One more thing," Martin's message read. "Found surveillance footage from the alley where you found the boys. Someone watched from a parked car across the street. Facial recognition confirms it was a prison guard from the Nevada facility. Jake arranged this. He wanted you to find them." The realization hit Mateo like a physical blow. This wasn't random. Jake had orchestrated everything: the photo, the location, the timing. His brother had deliberately placed his sons where Mateo would find them. "Mr. Greaves?" Ms. Lorne touched his arm gently. "Are you all right? You've gone pale." "My brother," Mateo whispered, his voice barely audible. "He's alive. And the boys. They're his sons. My nephews." Ms. Lorne's eyes widened. "That's significant information for the case. We'll need to verify." "I need to see him," Mateo interrupted, a desperate urgency overtaking him. "I need to know why." The courthouse clerk called his name, but Mateo barely heard it. 20 years of guilt crashed over him like a tidal wave. He had abandoned Jake to their father's abuse. He had built his fortune while his brother fell into addiction and crime. And now Jake had trusted him, of all people, with his children. Mateo's world shifted again just 3 days later. The call came during a budget meeting, the school's number flashing on his phone. He excused himself, already sensing something was wrong. "Mr. Greaves, this is Principal Davis from Oakwood Elementary. There's been an incident with Max." The words that followed blurred together, collapsed during recess. Unresponsive, ambulance called. Mateo was already rushing to the elevator before the call ended, barking orders at his assistant to clear his schedule. The 20-minute drive to St. Mary's Children's Hospital was the longest of his life. Every red light felt like an eternity. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He kept seeing Max's face that morning at breakfast, the slight shadows under his eyes that Mateo had attributed to poor sleep. When he burst through the emergency room doors, a nurse directed him to pediatric urgent care. There he found Milo sitting alone in a too-big chair, his small shoulders hunched, tears streaming silently down his face. "Where's Max?" Mateo asked, kneeling beside him. Milo pointed to a room down the hall. "The doctor is with him. They put a tube in his arm." Mateo gathered Milo into his arms, feeling the boy's body trembling against his chest. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, not knowing if it was true. A doctor emerged from Max's room, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Greaves? I'm Dr. Evans. Max is stabilized now." "What happened?" Mateo asked, still holding Milo tightly. "Severe dehydration and exhaustion. His blood work shows signs of long-term malnutrition." Dr. Evans's voice was gentle but matter-of-fact. When children experience food insecurity for extended periods, their bodies don't recover overnight. Has Max been eating normally at home? "Yes," Mateo answered, his throat tight. 3 meals a day, snacks. Everything Elena, my housekeeper, prepares." Dr. Evans nodded. "His body is still catching up. The records show they were found abandoned about 3 weeks ago." "Yes." The word came out hoarse. "These boys have been through more than we can imagine. Dr. Evans said quietly. Their bodies tell a story of chronic hunger and stress. Max's collapsed today. His system simply couldn't keep up anymore. Mateo felt Milo's small hand grip his shirt tighter. The reality of what the twins had endured before he found them hit him with crushing force. "Can I see him?" Mateo asked. Dr. Evans led them to Max's room. The sight of the small boy in the hospital bed, IV line in his arm, face pale against the white sheets, broke something inside Mateo. Max's eyes fluttered open when they entered. "Sir Mateo," he whispered, his voice weak. "I fell down." "I know, buddy." Mateo moved to the bedside, still carrying Milo. He sat in the chair beside the bed, settling Milo on his lap. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Max said. "The nurse Rita gave me juice. She said I'm brave." "You are very brave," Mateo agreed, reaching out to brush Max's hair from his forehead. The hospital released Max that evening with strict instructions for rest, hydration, and follow-up appointments. The twins sat quietly in the back seat during the drive home. Max, still pale but alert. Milo holding his brother's hand as if afraid to let go. Mateo kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, his mind racing with thoughts of Jake, malnutrition, and the life these boys must have endured before he found them. Elena had prepared Max's favorite chicken soup, and the kitchen smelled of home and comfort when they arrived. She fussed over the boys, tucking a blanket around Max on the couch and bringing him soup in a mug he could hold easily. "You scared us, mijo," she said softly, brushing his hair back. "I'm sorry," Max whispered, his eyes wide and solemn. "Nothing to be sorry for," Mateo said firmly. "You just need to rest and get stronger." That night, Mateo broke his own rule and let both boys sleep in his king-sized bed, one on each side of him. He read them 3 stories instead of the usual one, and stayed until they fell asleep, watching their small chests rise and fall with each breath. Only when he was certain they were deeply asleep did he slip away to the balcony, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. The city lights blurred before him as he stared into the distance. Jake was alive. Jake had children, these children, and had somehow orchestrated their placement in Mateo's path. Why? After all these years of silence, why reach out this way? The answers could only come from Jake himself. Mateo pulled out his phone and hesitated only briefly before making the call to Martin. "I need to arrange a visit to Nevada State Correctional," he said without preamble. "Jake Greaves, or whatever name he's using now." Martin didn't sound surprised. "I'll make the arrangements. Earliest would probably be next week." "Do it," Mateo said, ending the call. He didn't hear the balcony door slide open behind him. "Who's Jake?" Mateo turned to find Milo standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his stuffed penguin. "Just someone I used to know," Mateo answered, his voice carefully neutral. "Why aren't you asleep, buddy?" "I had a dream that Max was gone again," Milo said, his lower lip trembling. "I wanted to make sure you were still here too." Something twisted in Mateo's chest. He set down his glass and lifted Milo into his arms. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "I promise," Mateo said, carrying him back inside. The next morning, Mateo woke to find the boys already up, sitting at the kitchen table with crayons and paper, while Elena made pancakes. Max looked better, some color returned to his cheeks. "Sir Mateo," Max called when he saw him, "we made you something." Milo pushed a piece of paper across the table. Mateo picked it up and felt his breath catch. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, one tall, 2 small, standing hand in hand under a bright yellow sun. The tallest figure wore what appeared to be a tie. Above them, in wobbly capital letters, was written, "Family." Mateo stared at the drawing, something breaking open inside him. These boys, who had been abandoned and hurt, who had every reason to distrust the world, were offering him their hearts with such simple, devastating trust. "Do you like it?" Milo asked anxiously. Mateo couldn't speak. He nodded, blinking hard against the sudden burn in his eyes. "It's us," Max explained unnecessarily. "You, me, and Milo." "It's perfect," Mateo finally managed, his voice rough. I'm going to put it right on the refrigerator where everyone can see it." He turned away to place the drawing on the fridge, using the moment to compose himself. Family. After years of isolation, of building walls around himself, these two small boys had somehow found their way inside. And in 1 week he would face his brother, the man who had given him this unexpected gift and burden of love. The sun crested the distant mountains as Mateo's rental car cut through the Nevada desert. Shades of orange and purple painted the sky, but Mateo barely noticed the beauty around him. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind racing with questions he'd waited 15 years to ask. The correctional facility loomed ahead, a sprawling concrete complex surrounded by razor wire. Mateo parked, went through security, and followed a guard down a long corridor that smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. "Visitation rules are simple," the guard explained in a monotone voice. "No physical contact. 15 minutes. I'll be watching." Mateo nodded, his throat too dry to speak. The guard led him to a small room divided by a glass partition with chairs on either side, and then he saw him. Jake Greaves sat hunched on the other side of the glass. At 35, he looked 50. Gaunt face, hollow cheeks, dark circles under eyes that still held the same intensity Mateo remembered. His prison uniform hung loose on his frame, and a jagged scar ran along his jawline that hadn't been there before. When Jake looked up and saw Mateo, his eyes widened. For a moment, neither spoke. "You came," Jake finally said, his voice rough from disuse. "Didn't think you would." Mateo stared at his brother, the boy he'd left behind, now a broken man. "I found your sons in a dumpster," he said, each word clipped with barely contained anger. Jake flinched. "They're alive? They're okay?" "No thanks to you," Mateo snapped. "Max was hospitalized for malnutrition last week." Jake closed his eyes, pain etching deeper lines into his face. "I knew it was a risk, but I was out of options." "What happened to their mother?" "Overdosed 3 years ago." Jake's voice cracked. "I tried, Mateo. For a while, I really tried to keep it together for them. But when the drugs got hold again," he shook his head, "I couldn't drag them down with me." "So you abandoned them? Left them to freeze to death?" "I tracked you," Jake admitted, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "For months. I knew your routine, your shortcuts when traffic backed up. I knew you'd find them." Mateo felt like he'd been punched. "You planned this?" Jake nodded slowly. "I took that old family photo from Mom's place, made sure they had it, told them stories about their Uncle Mateo, the rich man who could give them everything I couldn't. You manipulated 2 children. I saved them." Jake's voice rose sharply before he caught himself. "I saved them from me, Mateo, from ending up in the system, separated. I remembered how you always took that alley when downtown was backed up. I knew you'd hear them." Mateo sat in stunned silence, torn between fury and a reluctant understanding. The guard shifted behind him, a reminder that time was short. Jake pulled out a folded document from his pocket and slid it across to the guard. "Signed guardianship papers. My lawyer drew them up. You're their legal guardian now, if you'll have them." "You're just giving them away?" Mateo asked, his voice hollow. "I'm giving them their best chance," Jake whispered. "The only good thing I've ever done?" Mateo drove back from the prison in silence. The desert stretched endlessly on either side of the highway, but he barely noticed. His mind was far away, trapped in memories he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. The car radio crackled with static before falling silent. In that quiet, the past came rushing back with painful clarity. Summer 1965. The air was thick with heat and tension in the small house on Maple Street. 10-year-old Mateo sat on his bed, carefully packing his suitcase for boarding school. His hands trembled slightly as he folded each shirt with precision. 7-year-old Jake stood in the doorway, watching with wide eyes that couldn't hide his fear. "Why can't I go too?" Jake asked, his small voice breaking. Mateo avoided his brother's gaze. "Mom says you're too young. Besides, Dad needs help around the house." What he didn't say was that their mother had only enough money to send one of them away. She'd chosen Mateo, the one with potential, the one who might escape their father's shadow. "Don't leave me here," Jake whispered. Before Mateo could answer, heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Their father appeared behind Jake, towering and unsteady, reeking of whiskey. "Still packing?" he sneered at Mateo. "Think you're better than us now?" Mateo froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd accidentally left one of his father's tools out in the rain the day before. The punishment was coming. He could feel it. "It was me," Jake suddenly piped up. "I took your hammer outside, not Mateo." Their father's bloodshot eyes shifted to Jake. "That right?" Jake nodded, standing straighter despite his fear. "Yes, sir." What happened next burned itself into Mateo's memory forever. His father grabbed Jake by the collar and dragged him down the hall. The sounds that followed, the belt, the cries, the pleading, would haunt Mateo for decades. He had sat there, paralyzed by fear and relief, knowing his little brother was taking his punishment. The next day, Mateo left for boarding school. He promised Jake he'd come back for him someday. But as the years passed and success found him, that promise faded beneath layers of ambition and denial. Back in the present, Mateo pulled his car to the side of the empty desert highway. His hands shook on the steering wheel. For the first time in 30 years, he allowed himself to truly feel the weight of what had happened, what he had allowed to happen. Tears came hot and painful, as if his body had forgotten how to cry properly. Jake had always protected him, even when it meant sacrificing himself. And how had Mateo repaid that loyalty? By walking away. By pretending Jake didn't exist when his life became complicated. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty car. "I'm so sorry." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the social services building as Mateo sat across from Ms. Lorne. He'd dressed in his best suit, the one he usually saved for closing million-dollar deals. Today's business was infinitely more important. "I've brought all the paperwork you requested," Mateo said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. His voice was steady, but his fingers tapped nervously against his knee under the table. Ms. Lorne adjusted her glasses and opened the folder. "Everything looks in order, Mr. Greaves. Your background check is clean, your financial stability is beyond question, and the home visits have been positive." She smiled warmly. "The boys are clearly thriving in your care." Mateo felt a flutter of hope in his chest. After years of emptiness, the thought of making Max and Milo permanently his filled a void he hadn't even known existed. "However," Ms. Lorne continued, her expression growing serious, "there's a complication I need to discuss with you." The hope in Mateo's chest froze. What kind of complication? The woman who came forward claiming to be the boy's aunt, Adana Mercer, isn't actually biologically related to them. "Then there's no issue," Mateo said quickly. "If she has no biological claim." "She's hired a lawyer," Ms. Lorne interrupted gently. "She claims she was a close friend of the boy's mother and has an emotional attachment to them. She's arguing that she should have custody based on prior relationship." Mateo's jaw tightened. "Prior relationship? Where was she when they were abandoned in a trash bin?" "I understand your frustration," Ms. Lorne said, "but the courts sometimes consider established emotional bonds in these cases. She's claiming she lost touch with the boys during a difficult period and has been searching for them." Mateo felt a flash of anger. "That's convenient timing. I'm not saying her claim will hold up," Ms. Lorne assured him, "just that we need to be prepared for a potential custody hearing." "I'll call my legal team immediately," Mateo said, already reaching for his phone. That afternoon, Mateo sat with Mr. Jacobs, his family attorney, in the mansion's study. The boys were playing in the garden with Elena, their laughter floating through the open window. "We have the stronger case," Mr. Jacobs assured him. "You have stable finances, a suitable home, and you've been their caretaker since they were found. Plus, we have the biological connection through your brother." Mateo nodded, watching the twins through the window. Max was attempting a cartwheel while Milo cheered him on. "I can't lose them," he said quietly. "You need to prepare them," Mr. Jacobs advised, "just in case they need to speak with the judge." Later that evening, Mateo gathered Max and Milo on the living room couch. They looked up at him with matching, curious expressions, their small feet dangling above the floor. "I need to tell you about an important grown-up meeting," Mateo began carefully. "It's to make sure you can stay here forever." The next morning, Mateo sat at his desk in the home office, surrounded by legal documents for the twins case. His laptop pinged with an incoming video call from David, his assistant. Mateo reluctantly clicked to accept. "Mr. Greaves, I've been trying to reach you all morning," David said, his voice tight with concern. "The Shanghai merger documents need your signature by noon today. The board is waiting, and Mr. Chen has already called twice." Mateo glanced at the adoption paperwork spread across his desk, then at a crayon drawing the boys had made. 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. He touched the corner of the drawing gently. "Cancel it," Mateo said quietly. "I'm sorry, sir?" David's face on the screen froze in disbelief. "The Shanghai deal? The one we've been working on for 18 months? "Yes, all of it." Mateo's voice grew stronger with each word. "Pull our offer. Notify the board we're withdrawing." David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But sir, that's nearly 40 million in projected first-year revenue. The shareholders will survive," Mateo cut in. "I can't be in Shanghai next week. I need to be here for a court hearing." "We could postpone the signing ceremony," David suggested desperately. "Mr. Chen might agree to—" "What's the point of building empires if you can't protect your own family?" Mateo asked, surprising himself with the words. Family. The term felt foreign on his tongue, yet somehow right. David stared at him through the screen. "I've worked with you for 7 years, and I've never heard you talk like this." "Things change," Mateo said simply. "People change." After ending the call, Mateo sat back in his chair. Mr. Jacobs, who had been silently reviewing documents in the corner, looked up with raised eyebrows. "That was quite a statement," the lawyer said. "Are you sure about this?" Mateo nodded. "For the first time in my life, I'm completely sure about something." That night, after dinner, Mateo tucked the twins into their beds. The room was cozy with soft lamplight and the glow-in-the-dark stars they'd stuck on the ceiling together. "Can we have a story?" Max asked, his eyes already drooping with sleepiness. "Please?" Milo added, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Mateo sat on the edge of the bed. "Tonight I thought I'd tell you a different kind of story." "Is it scary?" Max asked, perking up slightly. "No," Mateo smiled. "It's about when I was a little boy, not much bigger than you." The twins settled in, eyes wide with interest. "Once there were 2 brothers who lived in a small house," Mateo began, his voice soft. "The older brother loved music and would play songs on an old guitar. The younger brother would dance and sing along." "Like you play guitar for us," Milo exclaimed. "Yes, just like that." Mateo nodded, carefully editing out the darker parts of his childhood. The brothers didn't have many toys, but they had big dreams. The older brother dreamed of tall buildings and important meetings. But he forgot something important along the way. "What did he forget?" Max whispered. "That the most important things aren't things at all," Mateo said, gently brushing Max's hair from his forehead. "They're people. They're family." The twins listened entranced as Mateo wove a simplified version of his childhood. The good parts, the moments with Jake before everything fell apart. When he finished, both boys wrapped their arms around him in a tight hug. "We're not going anywhere," Max whispered fiercely. "Never ever," Milo agreed. Mateo held them a little longer than usual, breathing in the scent of their shampoo and feeling their small hearts beating against his chest. For the first time in decades, he felt tears prick his eyes. "Neither am I," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Neither am I." The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Mateo poured orange juice into 2 small glasses. Max and Milo sat at the counter, swinging their legs and munching on toast with strawberry jam. "Can we go to the park today?" Max asked, a hopeful gleam in his eyes. "Please," Milo added, his mouth ringed with red jam. Mateo smiled, about to answer when his phone buzzed violently across the counter. It was Martin Reyes, Strange. His investigator rarely called this early. "Excuse me, boys," Mateo said, stepping into the hallway. "Eat your breakfast." "Greaves," he answered. "Turn on your TV," Martin said without preamble. "Channel 8. Now." Frowning, Mateo walked to his office and flicked on the television. His stomach dropped as he saw his own face plastered across the screen beneath a bold headline. "Tech Tycoon Abandons Merger for Mysterious Children." The blonde reporter spoke rapidly. Sources close to billionaire Mateo Greaves confirm he's withdrawn from a $40 million deal with Chinese investors to focus on 2 children recently taken into his care. Questions remain about the children's origins and Greaves' sudden interest in fatherhood. Mateo's blood ran cold as the segment continued, showing grainy photos of Max and Milo entering his car. Someone had been watching them. His phone rang again, David this time. "I swear I didn't leak this," his assistant said immediately. "But it's everywhere. Tabloids, business news, social media. They're spinning wild theories about secret affairs and love children." Mateo's jaw clenched. Find out who did. He hung up and walked to the window. 3 news vans had already parked outside his gate. A small crowd of photographers clustered near the entrance, cameras pointed toward the house. "Sir Mateo?" Max's small voice came from behind him. "Elena says there are people with cameras outside." Mateo turned, forcing his face to relax. "It's nothing to worry about. Why don't you and Milo watch some cartoons in the media room?" Once the boys were settled with a SpongeBob marathon, Mateo called his security team to reinforce the perimeter. Then he paced his office, fury building with each step. Someone had violated his privacy, and worse, exposed the twins to public scrutiny. His phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Lorne. "Seeing the news. This could complicate the hearing. Call me." Just then, Elena rushed in. "Mr. Greaves, there's a woman with a microphone trying to talk to the boys through the garden fence." That was it. Mateo stormed outside, security guards flanking him as he approached the gate. A dozen reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Mr. Greaves, are these children really your secret heirs? Is it true you're hiding them from their mother? Sources say you're involved in a custody battle. Care to comment?" A tall man with slicked-back hair thrust a microphone through the bars. "Brad Winters, Celebrity Insider. Is it true you orchestrated a kidnapping to gain sympathy with the board?" Something snapped inside Mateo. He grabbed the microphone, yanking it close enough to pull Winters against the gate. "Listen carefully," Mateo growled, loud enough for all to hear. "Those boys are innocent children who deserve privacy and respect. Anyone who publishes photos of them or spreads lies about their situation will face the full force of my legal team." He released the microphone with disgust. And that's not a threat. It's a promise. As Mateo turned to go back inside, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sorry about the leak, boss, but business is business." Mateo froze, staring at the message. Someone close to him, someone who called him boss, had betrayed him. Back inside, he found Max and Milo still watching cartoons, laughing at the television, blissfully unaware of the storm building outside. Mateo stood in the doorway, watching their innocent joy. Their eyes met his, and both boys grinned widely. "Sir Mateo, come watch with us." In that moment, Mateo realized the stakes had changed. This wasn't just about custody and legal battles anymore. The media circus threatened the peace and safety he'd promised these boys, and someone he trusted had put them all at risk. Mateo stared at the text message until his vision blurred. Someone close had betrayed him. Someone who had access to his schedule, his meetings, his life. He walked to his office and closed the door, then pulled up the security footage from the company's server. For 2 hours, he scanned through recordings, phone logs, and email records. When the evidence finally appeared on his screen, Mateo sat back in his chair, a cold weight settling in his stomach. David, his assistant of 10 years, the man who'd organized his life, who knew every detail of his business and personal affairs. The betrayal cut deeper than Mateo could have imagined. The next morning, Mateo called David into his office. Elena had taken the twins to the playroom, promising them a morning of crafts and cookies. "You wanted to see me, sir?" David stood in the doorway, his expression neutral as always, tablet in hand ready to take notes. "Sit down," Mateo said, his voice dangerously quiet. David complied, crossing one leg over the other. "Is this about the media situation? I've drafted a statement for the press. I know it was you." Mateo slid his phone across the desk, showing the text message. David's face remained impressively composed, but a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth gave him away. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't." Mateo's voice hardened. "I have the call logs. You spoke to Channel 8 3 times yesterday morning. You sent emails to 2 tabloids from an anonymous account, but you used our company Wi-Fi to do it." The color drained from David's face. "Mateo, you need to understand." "Understand what? That you betrayed me? That you exposed those boys to danger?" David's composure finally cracked. "I was trying to save you," he burst out. 10 years I've helped build this empire, and you were about to throw it all away for 2 random kids." Mateo stood slowly. "Those random kids are my family." "They're not your family," David's voice rose. "They're a distraction. The board is already questioning your judgment. Investors are nervous. Everything we've built." "We?" Mateo's voice was ice. "I built this company. You organized my calendar." David flinched as if slapped. "I was protecting your legacy." "No," Mateo said. "You were protecting your position in it." He opened his desk drawer and removed a check. "This is 6 months severance. Security will escort you out." "Mateo, please, we're done." After David was gone, Mr. Jacobs, Mateo's legal advisor, entered the office. "That was necessary but unfortunate," he said. "The press will speculate about his departure." "Let them," Mateo replied. "I'm done caring what they think." That night, as Mateo tucked the twins into bed, Max looked up at him with serious eyes. "Was that man who left today your friend?" he asked. Mateo paused. "I thought he was." Max nodded wisely. "You don't need all those people. You have us now." The simple truth of the child's words hit Mateo like a physical blow. For years, he'd surrounded himself with people who served his empire, not him. He'd confused loyalty to his money with loyalty to his person. "Yes," Mateo said softly, smoothing Max's hair. "I have you now." The grandfather clock in Mateo's study chimed midnight, its deep resonance echoing through the otherwise silent mansion. Mateo rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his coffee mug, only to find it empty. Papers were scattered across his mahogany desk, court documents, character witness statements, and legal briefs that would determine the future of his family. "The aunt's legal team is playing dirty," Mr. Jacobs had warned earlier that day. "They're pushing a narrative that you're emotionally unstable and that the media circus makes your home an unsafe environment." Mateo flipped through the witness list again. The supposed aunt, a woman named Clara Donovan, had gathered 3 character witnesses: her pastor, a child psychologist who had never met the twins, and a former neighbor who claimed to have seen the boys occasionally. "It's thin," Mateo muttered to himself, "but emotional appeals can sway family court judges." His phone buzzed with a text from Martin Reyes. "Check your email. Important development." Mateo opened his laptop and clicked on the new message. The subject line read, "Witness Statement, Jake Greaves." His heart pounded as he downloaded the attachment. It was a scanned letter, handwritten on prison stationery, the penmanship shaky but determined. "To whom it may concern, my name is Jake Greaves. I am the biological father of Max and Milo Greaves. I am currently serving time at Nevada State Correctional Facility. I am writing this letter to support my brother, Mateo Greaves, in his petition to adopt my sons. When I was 7 years old, our father broke my arm because I spilled milk at dinner. Mateo, who was 12, stepped between us and took the next blow. He always protected me, even when it hurt him. I failed my sons. I got lost in drugs and bad choices. When I knew I couldn't care for them anymore, I remembered how Mateo had always protected me. I knew he would protect them too. Mateo doesn't know this, but I watched him for weeks before I left the boys. I saw how he treated people, with respect. I saw the man he'd become, strong, but not cruel like our father. My brother deserves a chance to be the father I couldn't be. My sons deserve the life he can give them. Please don't take them away from the only real home they've ever known. I know I have no right to ask anything of this court, but I'm asking anyway. Let my brother heal what I broke. Let him give my boys the childhood neither of us had. Jake grieves. Tears blurred Mateo's vision. He read the letter 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. The raw honesty of Jake's confession, his failures, his hopes, his memories, was unlike anything Mateo had expected from his troubled brother. The phone rang. It was Martin. "Did you read it?" the investigator asked. "Yes," Mateo's voice was thick with emotion. Will it help?" "Mr. Jacobs thinks it's exactly what we needed. A biological parent's endorsement carries significant weight. Plus, it's genuine. No judge could read that and not be moved." After hanging up, Mateo sat in the quiet of his study, Jake's words echoing in his mind. I knew he would protect them too. For years, Mateo had carried the guilt of abandoning his brother. He'd told himself it was necessary, the only way to build a life free from their father's shadow. But in Jake's letter was a different truth. Despite everything, Jake had trusted him, had seen something in him worth believing in. Mateo folded the letter carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket, close to his heart. Tomorrow in court, Jake's words would speak for both of them. Next day, the county courthouse buzzed with tension as Mateo straightened his tie and watched the door. His lawyer, Mr. Jacobs, leaned over and whispered reassurances, but Mateo barely heard them. All he could focus on were Max and Milo, sitting quietly with Ms. Lorne in the front row, their small legs dangling from chairs too tall for them. Judge Lawson entered, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. The room rose and fell back into silence as she reviewed the case file. "In the matter of guardianship for minors Max and Milo Greaves," she announced, her voice carrying through the wood-paneled courtroom. "We'll hear first from Ms. Clarissa Doyle." The woman who approached the stand was thin and nervous-looking, with kind eyes and fidgeting hands. She smoothed her floral dress before taking the oath. "Ms. Doyle, please explain your connection to the children," her attorney prompted. "I worked at the East Side shelter for 3 years," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "The boys stayed with us for 4 months last year. They were so small, so scared." Her eyes welled with tears. "I read to them every night. I made sure they had extra blankets when it was cold." She described birthday cupcakes she'd made them, clothes she'd mended, nightmares she'd soothed. When they disappeared from the shelter, I was heartbroken. I searched everywhere. Then I saw their faces in the newspaper with this wealthy man who never knew them before. Her voice cracked. They deserve someone who loved them before they were a headline. Mr. Jacobs cross-examined her gently, establishing that she had no biological connection and had never been their official caretaker. When she stepped down, her cheeks were wet with tears. Then it was Mateo's turn. He approached the stand slowly, aware of every eye in the courtroom. After taking the oath, he looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, 6 months ago I was a different man," Mateo said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I built companies. I closed deals. I thought that was what mattered." He glanced at the twins, who watched him with wide eyes. "I won't pretend I was looking to be a father, I wasn't. But finding Max and Milo wasn't just chance. It was a second chance, for all of us." Mateo's voice softened. "My own childhood taught me what a home shouldn't be. These boys have taught me what it should." He spoke of pancake breakfasts and bedtime stories, of first swimming lessons and crayon drawings on his refrigerator, of the family they had become. "I'm not perfect, Your Honor, but I love them and I'll spend every day trying to deserve them." As Mateo returned to his seat, a small hand shot up from the audience. It was Max, his face solemn and determined. "Young man?" Judge Lawson peered over her glasses, surprised. "Can I please say something?" Max asked, his voice small but clear. After a moment's consideration, the judge nodded. "This is unusual, but I'll allow it." Max walked to the front, too short for the witness stand, so the bailiff brought him a chair. Milo watched anxiously, clutching Ms. Lorne's hand. "We picked Mateo," Max said simply, looking around the quiet courtroom. "When he found us, we already knew who he was." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "We had his picture," Max continued. "Our dad showed us and said if we ever needed help, find this man." Max's small fingers gripped the chair. "But we really knew he was our family when he sang to us. He didn't know we were awake, but we heard him. He sang the same song our dad used to sing." Tears filled Mateo's eyes as he remembered that night, sitting outside their bedroom with a guitar, playing an old lullaby his mother had sung to him and Jake. "We chose him," Max said firmly, "and he chose us back." The courtroom emptied slowly. Voices hushed as people filed out into the hallway. Mateo knelt down to Max and Milo's level, his hands gentle on their shoulders. "You were so brave today," he told them, his voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." Max beamed proudly while Milo leaned against Mateo's chest, suddenly tired from all the excitement. The judge had announced she would take the evening to consider her ruling, with a decision expected tomorrow morning. "Can we have pizza tonight?" Max asked, already moving on from the drama of the courtroom to more important matters. Mateo laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Absolutely, with extra cheese." Back at the mansion, Elena prepared the boys' favorite meal while Mateo helped them with their baths. The day's tension still hung in the air, but he did his best to keep things normal for the twins. After dinner, they built a blanket fort in the living room and watched cartoons until their eyelids grew heavy. "Time for bed, Knights," Mateo said softly, scooping up Milo, who was already half asleep. In their bedroom, with its star-patterned nightlights and shelves lined with books, Mateo tucked them in with extra care. His movements were deliberate, almost reverent, as if memorizing every detail of this moment. "What if the judge says we can't stay?" Milo whispered, his voice small in the quiet room. Mateo's heart clenched. "Then we'll figure it out together," he promised. "But no matter what happens tomorrow, you two will always be my family." He kissed their foreheads and sang softly, the same lullaby that had once meant so much to him and Jake, the one that Max had mentioned in court. The boys drifted off to sleep, their faces peaceful despite the uncertainty that tomorrow would bring. Downstairs, Mateo poured himself a small glass of scotch and stood by the window, watching rain begin to fall. The mansion felt unusually quiet, the silence broken only by the gentle patter of raindrops against glass. The doorbell rang, startling him from his thoughts. Elena appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll get it," she said, hurrying to the front door. When she opened it, Clarissa Doyle stood on the doorstep, rain soaking through her thin jacket. Her hair clung to her face in wet strands, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "I need to speak with Mr. Greaves," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. Elena hesitated, protective instincts flaring. "It's very late, Ms. Doyle." "Please," Clarissa whispered. "It's important." Mateo appeared behind Elena, his expression guarded. "It's all right," he told the housekeeper. "Let her in." Elena stepped aside reluctantly, watching as Clarissa crossed the threshold, leaving a trail of rainwater on the marble floor. "I'm not here to fight," Clarissa said quickly, hugging herself against the chill. "I came to apologize." Mateo's eyebrows rose in surprise. He gestured toward the living room. "Come sit down." Clarissa's hands trembled as she accepted the mug of hot tea Elena had prepared. The rain continued to drum against the windows, creating a rhythm that matched the tension in the room. "There's something else you should know," Clarissa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I didn't mention in court." Mateo sat across from her, his posture rigid. "I'm listening." "When the boys first came to the shelter, I tried to find their mother." Clarissa stared into her tea, watching the steam rise. "The paperwork was incomplete, but there was a name. Nora Jennings." Mateo's breath caught in his throat. The name struck him like a physical blow. "I tracked down an old address in Phoenix, but by the time I sent a letter, she had moved on." Clarissa reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is everything I found. It's not much, but maybe." Mateo took the paper with numb fingers. Nora Jennings. he repeated, the name feeling strange on his tongue. You know her? Clarissa asked, noticing his reaction. I think I might. Mateo stood abruptly. Thank you for this. And for coming tonight. After Clarissa left, Mateo went straight to his study. Elena watched from the doorway as he unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he never opened. Inside was a stack of old correspondence, things he'd meant to deal with but never had. His fingers moved methodically through the pile until they found what he was looking for. A simple white envelope, postmarked 3 years ago. The return address had been smudged by rain or tears, making it nearly illegible. Mateo opened it with care, unfolding the letter inside. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Dear Mateo, it began. You don't know me, but I'm writing about Jake. He's in trouble and I don't know where else to turn. We have 2 little boys and I can't. The letter continued, detailing a life spiraling out of control. A woman trying to protect her children from their father's addiction while battling her own demons. It was signed simply NJ. Mateo sank into his chair, the weight of realization crushing him. She had reached out to him, Jake's ex, the twins' mother, and he had never even opened the letter. It had arrived during a major corporate merger, and he'd set it aside, assuming it was just another person looking for money. Sir? Elena stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Are you all right? No, Mateo said honestly, but I will be. He carefully folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. I need to find her, Elena. I need to make this right. Days turned into weeks as Mateo, Max, and Milo settled into their new life together. The cold, sterile mansion that had once echoed with emptiness now buzzed with laughter and the pitter-patter of small feet. Judge Lawson had signed the final adoption papers on a Tuesday morning, and Mateo had framed the certificate, hanging it proudly in the main hallway. It's official, he had told the boys that evening, his voice thick with emotion. You're stuck with me forever now. The twins had tackled him in a hug that nearly knocked him over, their small arms wrapped tightly around his waist. Forever and ever, Milo had asked, his eyes wide. Forever and ever, Mateo had promised. The mansion transformed with each passing day. Colorful drawings now covered the refrigerator door, held in place by alphabet magnets. The formal dining room, once used only for business dinners, became the site of their Saturday morning pancake tradition. Movie nights by the fireplace replaced Mateo's lonely evenings with scotch and spreadsheets. But even as joy filled their home, Mateo couldn't forget about Nora Jennings, the mother who had reached out to him years ago, whose plea for help had gone unanswered. The woman who had given birth to the 2 boys who now called him Dad. Martin Reyes continued his search quietly, following leads across 3 states. Mateo checked in weekly, always after the boys were asleep, always with the same question. Any news? One evening, as Mateo sat helping the twins with their homework at the kitchen table, his phone buzzed. Martin's name flashed on the screen. Keep working on those math problems, Mateo told the boys. I need to take this call. He stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding. Martin, what is it? I found her, Mateo, Martin said, his voice steady. Nora Jennings. She's alive and well in Colorado. Mateo leaned against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. Tell me. She's been sober for 2 years, works at a women's shelter helping others get clean. She's built a life for herself. Does she want the boys back? Mateo asked, the question he'd been dreading. That's the thing, Martin replied. She doesn't. She wants to thank you, Mateo. Her exact words were, thank the man who didn't give up on them when I had to. Mateo closed his eyes, relief washing over him. When can I speak with her? There's more, Martin said. She's been watching from afar. She knew you took them in. She's seen the news stories. She said she cried when she saw the photos of you 3 at the park. Mateo looked back toward the kitchen where Max was helping Milo with a difficult problem, their heads bent together in concentration. The woman who had brought these precious boys into the world had been watching, waiting, making sure they were safe. Tell her I want to meet, Mateo said softly. Tell her Tell her the boys are happy and loved. A week later, Mateo pulled his car into the gravel parking lot of the New Beginnings Women's Shelter in Colorado. The modest brick building with its hand-painted sign stood in stark contrast to the gleaming skyscrapers where he usually conducted business. His hands trembled slightly as he turned off the engine. He sat for a moment, gathering his courage. In his jacket pocket was a small photo album, pictures of Max and Milo's first months with him that he'd carefully selected the night before. Taking a deep breath, Mateo stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. A bell chimed softly as he pushed open the door. The shelter's main room was warm and lived in, with mismatched furniture and handmade quilts draped over worn sofas. A few women sat in a corner, sorting through donated clothing. None of them was Nora. "Can I help you?" asked an older woman with silver hair pulled back in a bun. "I'm here to see Nora Jennings," Mateo said, his voice steadier than he felt. "She's expecting me." The woman's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "You must be Mr. Greaves. I'm Patricia, the shelter supervisor. Nora's in the kitchen. Follow me." Patricia led him through a narrow hallway into a large industrial kitchen, and there she was, Nora Jennings, arranging sandwiches on a tray for the shelter residents. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her hands moved with practiced efficiency. When she looked up, their eyes met across the room. Time seemed to stand still. Nora froze, a sandwich halfway to the tray, her eyes instantly filled with tears. "I'll give you two some privacy," Patricia murmured, slipping out of the kitchen. "Mateo," Nora whispered, her voice breaking on his name. She set down the sandwich with shaking hands and wiped her palms on her apron. Mateo stepped forward, not quite knowing what to say to the mother of his sons. "I'm so sorry," Nora blurted out, tears now streaming down her face. "I abandoned them, my own babies. I was so sick, the drugs, the homelessness. I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone two little boys who deserved so much better." She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to compose herself. "When I heard from one of the shelter workers that a rich man named Mateo had adopted twin boys, I knew. I just knew it was them. I've been watching from afar. The news stories, the custody battle. I wanted to reach out, but I was afraid I'd mess up their lives again." Mateo expected to feel anger toward this woman who had left her children. Instead, he felt something unexpected, compassion. "I don't blame you," he said softly, surprising himself with the truth of those words. "Life is complicated. We all make mistakes." He stepped forward and, without thinking, embraced her. Nora stiffened in surprise before melting into the hug, her tears dampening his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for loving them when I couldn't." When they pulled apart, Nora wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "There's something else you should know," she said. "I knew Jake left the boys near your office building. I was in on the plan." 3 days later, Nora stood at the entrance to Mateo's mansion, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She had changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress. Nothing fancy, but clean and respectable. Her hands clutched a small paper bag containing 2 hand-knitted scarves she'd made during sleepless nights at the shelter. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, reaching for the doorbell with trembling fingers. Inside, Elena moved efficiently around the kitchen, stirring a pot of homemade chicken soup while checking on the freshly baked rolls in the oven. Mateo had told her only that a special guest was coming, but Elena had her suspicions from the nervous way he kept straightening picture frames and checking his watch. The doorbell chimed through the house. "I'll get it," Max called, racing down the hallway with Milo close behind. They had been playing Knights and Dragons in the living room, wooden swords abandoned mid-battle. Max pulled open the heavy door, his curious eyes landing on the nervous woman standing on the porch. He offered her his brightest smile. "Are you here for dinner too?" he asked. Nora couldn't speak. She stared at her son, so much taller than in her memories, his eyes still the same warm brown as his father's. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Milo appeared beside his brother, peering up at the stranger with thoughtful eyes. He reached out and tugged gently at her coat sleeve. "You look like someone from our baby pictures," he said softly, his head tilting to one side. Mateo appeared behind the boys, his face a mixture of anxiety and hope. He placed a gentle hand on each boy's shoulder and knelt down beside them. "Boys," he said, his voice warm and steady, "this is someone very special. This is your mom." The twins went completely still, their eyes widening as they looked from Mateo to Nora and back again. For one terrible moment, Nora thought they might run away or cry. Instead, Max took a small step forward. Then Milo followed. Without a word, they moved into her arms, pressing their faces against her as she knelt to their level. Nora wrapped her arms around them, tears streaming down her face as she held her sons for the first time in years. Elena appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. She smiled gently at the scene before quietly slipping back to the kitchen to set another place at the table. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of Mateo's mansion as the household bustled with activity. Today was the twins' school play, Knights of the Round Table, and excitement filled every corner. "Stand still, Max," Mateo said, kneeling to adjust his son's crooked bow tie. "You can't slay dragons if your armor isn't properly fastened." Max giggled, puffing out his chest proudly in his costume. "Sir Max never loses a battle." Across the room, Nora gently combed Milo's hair, carefully slicking it back with a touch of gel. Her hands moved with tender precision, as if making up for all the motherly moments she'd missed. "Are you nervous, sweetie?" she asked softly. Milo shook his head, then nodded slightly. "A little, but I remember all my lines." "You'll be wonderful," Nora assured him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Elena packed snacks for after the show while Mateo gathered programs and the video camera. The morning flowed with a natural rhythm, as if they'd been doing this together for years instead of days. In Mateo's SUV, the boys chatted excitedly from the back seat, while Nora and Mateo exchanged glances from the front, small smiles that carried volumes of unspoken understanding. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with parents finding seats and teachers herding excited children backstage. Mateo and Nora settled into their seats in the third row, programs clutched in hand. "I never thought I'd be here," Nora whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears, watching them in a school play like normal parents. As the lights dimmed and the principal welcomed everyone, Mateo felt a strange fullness in his chest. The curtain slowly rose, revealing a cardboard castle where Max and Milo stood with their classmates, looking both nervous and thrilled. Without thinking, Mateo reached over and took Nora's hand. She squeezed it gently. "You gave them a life I never could," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Mateo smiled, his eyes never leaving the stage where his sons stood tall and proud. "You gave them their hearts." The prison visiting room was cold and stark, a sharp contrast to the warmth Mateo carried with him. It was exactly 1 year since that fateful morning when he'd found Max and Milo huddled in that trash bin. Now, on this anniversary, Mateo sat across from his brother Jake, sliding a photo album and a folder of colorful school drawings across the metal table. "They made these for you," Mateo said, his voice softer than it had been in their previous visits. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder, his weathered face transformed, eyes lighting up with unmistakable pride as he studied each crayon masterpiece. There was Max's drawing of a castle with "Our Family" written in wobbly letters. Milo had created a picture of 4 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "They're so talented," Jake whispered, running his finger gently over the paper. "Look at them. They're really thriving, aren't they?" Mateo nodded, opening the photo album. Max won the spelling bee last month, and Milo's joined the junior choir. He pointed to photos of birthday parties, their first day of school, and holiday celebrations. "Nora visits every Sunday now. She's doing really well." Jake wiped at his eyes. "I never thought it would work out like this. I just wanted them safe." "You did the right thing," Mateo said, meaning it completely. "I'm working toward parole," Jake said, sitting up straighter. "My hearing's in 6 months. Behavior's been good. I've completed 3 programs." Mateo nodded, something resolute in his expression. There's a treehouse waiting to be built. The boys have been asking for one. For a moment, they just looked at each other, decades of pain and misunderstanding giving way to something new. When the guard announced visiting hours were ending, they stood. For the first time in decades, Mateo reached out and hugged his brother. Jake held on tight, as if afraid it might be the last time. As time went on, the Greaves household transformed completely. What was once a cold, sterile mansion became a vibrant home filled with warmth and noise. Colorful artwork covered the refrigerator, toys scattered across plush carpets, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through hallways that had known only silence for years. Mateo found purpose beyond his business empire. He established a foundation that donated generously to youth shelters across the city. Twice a month, he volunteered at family courts, helping guide frightened children through the system he once navigated with Max and Milo. His newest project was funding a treehouse building initiative in Jake's name, providing safe play spaces for children in underprivileged neighborhoods. Elena, who had witnessed the entire journey, was no longer just the housekeeper. During a special family dinner, Mateo presented her with adoption papers of her own, officially making her the boys' grandmother. She wept as she accepted, finally having the family she'd always dreamed of. Nora blossomed too. With Mateo's encouragement, she completed her teaching certificate and began working at the twins' school, helping children with special needs. Her gentle patience, born from her own difficult journey, made her a natural. One sunny afternoon, as they all gathered for a backyard barbecue, Max and Milo disappeared inside, returning with something hidden behind their backs. They presented Mateo with a handmade trophy fashioned from painted cardboard and glitter. Best dad in the world. "We voted," Max explained seriously. "It was unanimous." Mateo's eyes filled with tears as he accepted their gift. "You're not just the one from the photo," Max said, his small hand on Mateo's arm. "You're the one who stayed." In the backyard of the Greaves mansion, a magnificent treehouse stood tall among the oak trees, a testament to second chances and new beginnings. Jake, newly released on parole, put the finishing touches on the wooden railing, his face peaceful in a way Mateo had never seen before. "All done," Jake called down, wiping sweat from his brow. Max and Milo immediately raced across the lawn, their sneakers kicking up grass. "Uncle Jake, race you to the top!" Max shouted, already grabbing the first rung of the ladder. Milo followed close behind, his laughter pure and uninhibited. "Last one up is a rotten egg." Jake playfully let them get ahead, winking at his brother before joining the race. On the patio, Mateo settled into a chair beside Nora and Elena, accepting the steaming mug of coffee Elena handed him. The three watched in contented silence as Jake and the boys disappeared into the treehouse, their excited voices floating down. "They're happy," Nora said softly, her eyes misty. "I never thought I'd see this day." Elena patted her hand. "Family finds its way, even through the darkest times." Mateo leaned back, letting golden sunlight filter through the leaves onto his face. He thought about that cold winter morning when he'd found two tiny bodies huddled in a trash bin. How close he'd come to driving past. How different all their lives would have been. The boys' laughter rang out above them, and Jake's deeper chuckle joined in. Mateo smiled, his heart full. He had found them in the trash, but they had given him more than he ever gave them: purpose, love, and the family he never knew he needed. "Some things in life don't arrive wrapped in gold," Mateo said quietly. "Sometimes, the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places." If you enjoyed the story of Mateo, Max, and Milo, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. If you enjoyed the story of Mateo, Max, and Milo, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.